I think so. Like I believe it's on the given vision to open the debate with find the first problem first.
Asian societies in this current status quo are most likely very progressive in the end of the day anyway. I think we can already see how Japan people are very busy or how Chinese people are very progressive. Same with Arabic people in the end of the day anyway. They're very progressive and active in the end of the day. But notice how they still have interest in some aspects that they're most likely to have a lot of kids, since in some part of the Asian society, in the end of the day anyway, the child free is not a trend in the society to begin with. Panels, notice here, Asian society in this motion does not only revolve around developed countries to begin with, but it also revolves around developing countries to begin with. I think some examples like China, same with Indonesia and India to begin with, I think it already draws on how active and progressive Asian societies actually is. However, these societies have most likely active or hard labor jobs by actually having a low payment in the end of the day anyway. But in the end of the day, they still have interest in actually raising their family, in actually have build a better family, and also notice that they have their own lives to actually build anyway. Why do we actually oppose the stigmatization of this motion anyway? I think it's actually already clear that it is not bad actually. It's okay, and I'll be explaining to you furthermore in my substantive later on. A little bit clarification. I think in this debate, we are not debating on the outsourcing elder care itself, but we're debating on the stigmatization to actually begin with. Now, how do we actually oppose this motion? I think we will create a narrative to the society on that it is actually okay. The stigmatization is actually okay in the end of the day anyway. I'm sorry, I think the stigmatization should not be there in the end of the day anyway, and we would spread awareness to some aspects of the Asian society. We spread awareness on how Asian society should actually have an understanding where people would actually outsource their elders in Asian society to begin with. Furthermore, we would recommend some places or some substitution in which where place or recommending places in which where should we put our parents to take care to begin with. Also, a little bit clarification. Stigmatization is a perspective of something that we cannot assume the value, but it's a bad form of generalization that is created by some groups on how some people would actually act. Therefore, it shows that outsourcing elder care is viewed as an immoral act because the society sees that it has an act of abandoning your parents to begin with. But panels, outsourcing your elder care doesn't mean that you're abandoning your parents, that you don't have a caring feeling towards your parents to begin with. You do have caring feelings for them. You do still have enough attention or enough relationship with them, but it shows really the opposite on how the stigmatization actually is, and it is done so that they don't want that they want it, but because they have their own burden and they have their own self to take care of and they have their own family, they have their own prioritization. Therefore, they don't have enough time to actually taking care of someone that is capable to actually being take care of themselves, or the other peoples are most likely to give us help to actually taking care of our parents to begin with. What do we actually want in this debate? First of all, we want more understanding between families relationships to begin with. I know that some parents would actually think on why my kids would not want to actually take care of me. I think from that it could create an understanding or a communication between child and parents on what the child actually wants, on what the parents would actually think on how the prioritization of the child itself. Second of all, of course, we wouldn't want the stigmatization to begin with, because the stigmatization itself would not actually fulfill on the Asian society interest to begin with. And second of all, and lastly, we don't want any burden towards the individuals within by us in some terms and condition in which they would not have enough time or they would not have enough actually attention or power to actually take care of their parents within a couple of factors that revolves around this debate. First of all, the parents, the child's family, the child itself, society, and the next generation to begin with. Opposition side of the house cannot say that in our side of the house we have lack of care, we don't have strong affection, and we don't have any reminders child to the parents itself. I think the opposite side of the house cannot actually bash our side of the house by actually saying that, because we can already clarify to you that the individual itself and the parents itself would actually still have any relations with the families within anyways, with the families within in the end of the day anyway. I think it already shows that they still have a strong connection. However, they would not they would put their parents taking care by other parents in the end of the day anyway. So why is it justifiable in the end of the day anyway? First of all, I think we need to understand on the being of the parents and the child to begin with. First of all, the parents and the child both want attention, and they both want a healthy relationship between the family's life in the end of the day anyway. However, the parents itself and the child itself have their own ways in actually having to live their lives anyway. Their parents have their own ways, and the child are most likely to have their own ways either. The child itself, especially in the Asian society, in which it is progressive and in which it has a really intense work jobs and low payment and something like that, of course they would have a clash between what they actually want, or a clash between on how their relationship is gonna work. Therefore, I think communication or understanding would actually lead into their ways of actually finishing what the current problems that they have anyway. I think both of the parents and the child itself, by actually understanding, maybe putting or outstanding outsourcing their parents into an elder care would actually be okay in the end of the day anyway, because it already shows that we would recommend you some places or some substitutions in which the places itself would actually fulfill the parents' interest, and we would still actually watch them in the end of the day anyway, and we would still visit them in the end of the day anyway. Therefore, notice that elder care is not actually a bad place to begin with. It's not actually a place where parents cannot do anything in the end of the day anyway. Elder care is still revolves around people who would actually have some caring or have some understanding between the elders to begin with, and the child itself would still actually give attention, would still actually visit the parents if they have some times in the end of the day anyway. Therefore, their attention or their relationship will not break in the end of the day anyway. Therefore, it's actually see that this is actually a good thing, and this is a morally thing to actually do in the end of the day anyway. It shows by the communication itself. It gives a lot a shape of care between the child and the parents to begin with, because it shows that the child would try to understand on what the parents actually want. They want to have a strong bond within their child anyway, and the parents itself would also understand that they want their child to be successful in the end of the day anyway. They understand that their child have their future, they have their own families, they have their own lives, and they have their own interests to actually fulfill in the end of the day anyway. Second of all, we're talking, I think I've already explained to you on what the relationship itself is not a part of abandoning itself anyway. We're not abandoning our parents. We're also not giving any care of our parents. We're still caring of our parents, and we'll still be there with our parents. However, we would actually give an understanding that we don't actually, we have some terms and conditions in which we cannot actually put our prioritization to our parents furthermore in the end of the day anyway. Therefore, we actually outsource our parents into an elder care society in which it could most likely fulfill the actor's interest to begin with. Therefore, this explanation will be explained more by my deputy, and we proudly propose this motion. Thank you. Tadi makasih.
Our responsibility is to provide the first option to hear.
I think what proposition lacked in terms of understanding is the understanding of care in the first place. While we concede that the primary use of care is so that the parents can have quality health and will not be abandoned in financial and health matters, we also concede that we must first look at the culture of Asian societies in order to understand what care these parents actually need. Because at the end of the day, care is subjective, right? I would like to tell you, I would like to give you this understanding. For imagine a child who, for all their life, has been with their babysitter. Does it mean that the parent does not care about them? Maybe not. They provide a good quality babysitter. But does that mean that the child doesn't feel abandoned by their parent? That does, it's not so. Even if the parent has the best intentions for the child, it does not mean that the child still doesn't feel abandoned, right? So we need to look at firstly what the culture in Asian society is. While I concede that Japan has some more progressive cultures, that Arab has some more progressive cultures, we need to look at again what the proposition said. Developing countries, right, as a whole, not just developed countries. In developing countries, I would like to point out one, that the culture, even though the younger people are still progressive, the older people, the vulnerable actors, or the elderly that we're talking about, still have this concept that family is most important. Most of the time, they raise their children under the so that their children can, one, make them proud, be good society, and take care of them when they're older. That is why most people in low middle income societies in developing countries have children, right? Secondly, I would like to point out that if we're talking about developing countries here, the elder care is expensive. Even if they say they'll recommend institutions, etc., etc., elder care is still expensive. If we say there's less expensive elder care, then how can we ensure the quality of that elder care in the first place, right? So again, we need to look at all factors in this debate. Secondly, I would like to point out that again, I would like to characterize stigmatization first. Stigmatization does not mean that there is no exclusion. First of all, we would like to concede that not everyone can take care of their parents, right? Some people have physical disabilities. Some people have mental disabilities. We understand that. Then we are not saying that everyone should be vilified for putting their parents in a home. We are saying that this stigmatization should occur for people who have the mental capacity to take care of their parents, for people who have the physical capacity but choose not to. Why? Two reasons. First, I think I will explain the principle of this debate inherently and why in Asian communities it is not principally justified to put your parents in elder care homes, and then my team will explain the practical benefit, the practical harms of it. Okay, starting with number one. Principally, there is a basis of reciprocity, right? If your parent took their entire lives taking care of you, if they were there for every school event, if they were there for every single important event in your life, why shouldn't you be there for them? I understand that technically you're still being there for them, you're still paying for their elder care, you're still giving them the quote unquote facilities, but it does not connect with the moral wants of the parent, right? Because in Asian communities, what people want, what elders want, is to be close to their children, right? For these elders, they know, most of them no longer have like, oh, I want to become a president, I want to this, I want to that. No, their last purpose in their old age is to be close to their children, is to reap the benefits of the children that they have, right? They want to be close. They want to say, hey, son, I'm proud of you. Let's have some fun. That's what they want, right? And while we concede that putting elder care doesn't technically mean like completely abandoning your parents in that institution, we still concede that it is not enough. The connection is still not enough if you just visit your parent whenever you have free time. We understand that most people do not have bad intentions in mind, right? Most people just think, oh, let's put that in here so he is safe, so he is healthy. But again, if the parents prioritize their children's feelings when they were little, why is it not a moral obligation for the child to prioritize their parents' feelings in the long run as well? We think that there is a basis of reciprocity here, that parents should have the same emotional needs met by the children in their old age, right? Secondly, the concept of care. Care is dependent on the requirements of the person being cared for, right? We can see that again, health is most important, health is paramount, we understand that. But the point of care is not only that people are healthy, that people are healthy, that people can live well, but also that they feel enjoyment. As a parent in this debate, you would not only want to be healthy in your old age, but you would also want to feel content, right? So to say that care is only limited to how well the parent is being treated at the institution, how healthy they are, is simply principally unjust because their emotional needs are not being met, right? So now a couple of rebuttals. One, I think I've explained why the characterization of a progressive Asian country is not really likely, because it doesn't take into account the lower middle income cultures that exist even in the Arab and etc., right? Also, we would like to state that practically it's not available in the status quo right now for people to have afford elder care that is actually good. So what does this mean for for lower income, middle income families, right? So what does this mean? This means if we remove the stigmatization, then people who feel burdened by their parents, and now I would like to just state that people who feel burdened by their parents are not necessarily evil people. We understand that these people have their own families. We understand that these people have their own goals and needs in life. But we go back to the basis of reciprocity, that even if they have their own priorities, their parents should still be a priority. These people will think that it's okay to find substandard elder care because the stigmatization of society is gone. They think, oh, I can just get this person, he's cheap, etc., etc. And what if proposition were to say that no, they will still try to find the best elder care because of the health, because they care about their parents' health, because of the care of the parent thing. We would like to point out that again, they have in this situation, these people are not putting their parents at the top priority. Therefore, they will only do checks when they have time, right? When they're not focusing on, let's say, their job, etc., etc. So what will happen in the long run? I would like to state again the example of a babysitter. If a parent hires a babysitter and they've done quality control maybe, but they're not always there to check on the babysitter, right? What will happen to the child when the babysitter, maybe they don't have malintent, maybe they're just substandard, maybe they don't know that a baby shouldn't be eating like chili at their age right now, right? So what we want to state here is that at the end of the day, stigmatization provides not only the emotional care, the stigmatization ensures the emotional care for these parents are being met, and secondly, that it ensures quality control for the care that the parents are receiving itself in Asian countries, in the culture that we reside in. So that's why we are incredibly proud to oppose.
Thank you so much for speaking now. On the second problem, the same career.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I think our position misunderstood what outsourcing adult care really means and our framing like our PM trying to say. We don't say that outsourcing is really abandoning the parents or the elders to panti jompo, for example, or other facilities, for example. It is optional at the end of the day for their child to send them at the end of the day. Regarding on their economic condition after all. They said that care from child is subjective anyway. But I think we already clear up that they would still have options how they can take care of their parents at the end of the day. They have option if they like regarding of their economic condition, if they're capable to send their parents to a panti jompo, for example, or other facilities that are good quality for their parents at the end of the day. It is optional for them. But even they cannot afford that, they can still find other other workers, for example, that is really trying to understand the parents. For example, it is not the quality of a facility doesn't require the parents can be happy after all. It really needs a worker that is understanding the parents at the end of the day and trying to fit in the emotional or the personality of the parents after all. And they said that family, and we said that family is the most important in the child's case after all. Imagine you are a child trying to focus on your family, and therefore you have a lot of priorities to be prioritized, right? Families, economic condition, jobs, or private life, for example. Therefore, in our case, we are trying to say that family is the most important for a child to prioritize, because parents are not really trying to really trying to force their child to be taking care of them, for example. And they said that it is expensive for their parents to be sent to a good facility or good quality facilities or pantijohn, for example. But we already said that we would put the responsibility to other, for example, that I already said, for example, option there are other options for their child to be taking care of their parents at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, they said that elders' interest is to receive care from their child. But I think parents are not always have the same interest their own, because parents actually really want their child to be focused on their private life, for example. The parents really want their child to focus on their families, jobs, dreams, or private life, for example. But at the end of the day, the elders already want to spend their life separately from the child, for example. They want to spend their quality time with other elders, for example. They can spend their life playing games, for example, like mahjong, for example, with other elderly, for example, in other society or elderly society. We think that the elderly interest of forcing children to taking care of them is not really important at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, elders interest is subjective. And moving on, before that, I will take that POI.
You say that it's not, for the parents, it's not a priority, but then you say that family should be a priority.
I already said that family is the most top priority, but I didn't say that parents is not excluded from their family. But I think that a family that is being prioritized by their child is their main family, their husband, for example, and their child, for example, that they really need to be focused on the first place at the end of the day. But we didn't say that their elder parents is not included in their family. But at the end of the day, in a big family, parents will the child will be focusing on their elders at the end of the day, right? Now moving on. They said, number two, why outsourcing elder care is okay after all. First of all, what condition that makes them outsource the elders? First of all, economic condition, for example, having to work longer or long hours, having other priorities, their own family or small family, main family, for example, or pursuing their own private dreams and other private life. They have other priority, for example, pursuing education or jobs that they want to prioritize, and then they want to try to achieve what their parents dream to their child after all. What condition that makes elder needs care? At the end of the day, we don't say that we literally just abandon the elders, not taking care of them, etc. But in urgent situation, the elders is sick, for example, it is the responsibility for the child after all for them to take care of their parents. But we don't say that the child doesn't really not taking care of their parents, but their child is reasonable to do that after all, due to economic condition, for example, where they have to do their jobs or having to take care of their own family. Panel stated, and in the end of the day, the stigmatization is only hindering the child to be pursuing their own life at the end of the day. This bad perspective will only view outsourcing elder care as a bad thing after all. But just as our PM said, it doesn't mean we literally just abandon them. It is okay for the child to outsource the elders after our panels. Notice that stigmatization is a burden for the child to begin with. Social discourse of how abandoning or not taking care directly your parents is bad and not justified. But it is okay on our side after all, because the child is reasonable to leave their house and focusing on their life. Society eventually will create a bad perspective to a child that is not taking care of their parents 24/7 directly, for example. They view them as not an ungrateful child, failed child, unsuccessful child uncaring child, but panels notice that it is okay after all because the child has their own goal in their life. Imagine being criticized by other people, neighbors, for example, looking in Asian society, having flaws, actions doing that is not accepted in the society, outsourcing parents, for example, they will be attacked at the end of the day. They will be criticized at the end of the day. You are doing works or effort or hard work to achieve the dream or goal that your parents also want you to achieve it. But at the end of the day, we say that the parents really have a priority for their child after all. The parents really want their child to be pursuing their own goals rather than focusing on their parents and the because it is their child life after all. We say that the development and the child and parents is guaranteed at the end of the day because parents and child can still develop even with this even without this stigmatization, we say that parents and child can still develop a bondly because child can focus on work or private life and parents can receive quality time with other relationship with other society, for example, or other elders, for example. That is why the stigmatization is only creating a bad perspective of society that is only hindering the child to be focusing on their private life, own goals, own jobs, own family, for example. And we didn't say that their parents is literally just being abandoned by their child. But at the end of the day, the child can still visit their parents and really talk about their life, for example, ending the day with their parents after all. And that is what proposition proud to propose.
Is to like to identify it.
Check, am I loud enough to be heard? Cool. Well, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Judge admits that DPM's speech on her speech was not enough to prove why, at the end of the day, the parents will be happy, the parents will be healthy by these elder care services because they want to. They said that they want the best quality of healthcare services, of happiness in their parents, right? But they never told us on their mechanism, on their model, on how the likelihood of their role will be so much enough to prove at the end of the day they will give this kind of like mental power, emotional power, and etc., right? But then let me clarify two things here. Firstly, they ignoring the fact that many problematic issues happen in our world, in our status quo. We found that they being so naive by generalizing if the parents would assuming their kids to understand their child. They say that, oh, as the parents, we do understand. If our child need to be focusing on their work, they need to take care of their own families. Yes, it is. Is the parents is not included as the family? Of course, it's included, right? But you try to dismiss this existence of this kind of parents in your world. But then secondly, they miscontextualize in their own statement where they said that they will prioritize the family. That meaning the parents also include as family. But they say that, oh, they just want to prioritize this child family the first, then they are going to neglect these parents, right? But then let's move to my primary rebuttal. Firstly, let's engage with the parents' interest they mentioned at the very beginning of their speech, right? They ignoring the fact that many parents wanting their child to take care of themselves. They said that, oh, every parents have different interests. Every parents know and understand what their child need the most. Exactly. You ignoring the other parents that want their child to take care of themselves by themselves, not by using this kind of elder home services, hire workers, and etc. etc. But then move to my second rebuttal. Then let's engage with their side of the house. They say that about the economic conditions, right? Again, the elder care is expensive. We're now talking about the Asian societies where mostly Asian countries are still developing. Like for example, Indonesia, Malaysia. We send our takeaway. We send our workers to work in developed countries, in other Asian developed countries like Arabic, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, and and any other, right? We say that it is not justified because at the end of the day, the quality is reduced. Let's take the example like barang KW or the real one, right? Luxury things, for example. When you're reducing when you say that, oh, there's healthcare, there's elder care that is not really expensive, then you will provide your family with the less quality of elder care. Then let's take another example. When it is the best, then you have to pay more. Like for example, doctor. If you want a best doctor, then you need to prove, then you need to pay for expensive thing, right? Then if you say that, oh, in Asian countries, they just need to taking of their family by supporting their family through this elder care. At the end of the day, you need more funding. And how in the fact that we both parties are agree that in the fact that developing countries in Asia are still lacking of resources, lacking of financial necessity, and etc. Right? But then let me telling you what we have proved in our burden of proof. First, both parties need to prove that the stigmatization will impact the society, whether in a good or bad way. For example, like the Asian countries, more likely easy to be influenced. For example, like i.e. Japan, South Korea, where the societal pressure will influence other families to do the same thing, right? But then secondly, both parties have to prove whether which side can giving more meaningful relationship to their parents, as I told you in the first place. But then thirdly, they have to prove why outsourcing elder care in Asian countries is better compared to self-care done by their own families. And fourthly and lastly, we will prove to you the stigmatization will create new narrative that problematic to the Asian countries, right? Let's crystallize how the workers of elder care looks like in their side, right? In developing countries, many TKI and TKW were sent to developed countries like Taiwan, Arabic, South Korea, Japan, etc. Most of them are not certified and qualified enough to be guaranteed of taking care of parents. There's so many problems, like for example, there's a babysitter that neglected the baby, and because assuming when these Asian countries are really busy to taking care of their work, they have no time, they have no space, time to taking care of their parents or their child, because at the moment they never know if these workers are actually abusive to their families, right? But before moving on to my argument, is there MPI? 1, 2, 3. Okay, no engagement then. Meaning that they already agree with all our statements, right? But then move to my first argument. Why there is no guarantee of elder home workers is capable to taking care of parents, right? First argument. At the moment when other people taking care of your parents, there will be no guarantee if they will do it well, right? For example, like babysitter that being abusive, takeaway that neglected the parents' customer in Taiwan, for example, and etc. etc. Or preemptive, if that even if they might say that, oh, this worker is certified, which family will going to hire the best from the best of the workers? Exactly. At the moment when these rich families are too busy to go to work, they will lose their eyes to taking care of their parents. This means there will be there will be probability in the worst scenario if they will be neglected, right? Especially this scenario, this smart worker, for example, they know and they have experienced so many cases how to cover up their issues. There is being our problem that happen in our status quo, right? But then B, let's talk about the parents with health issues, right? Thus, who suffer from cancer and severe disease, for instances. At the end of the day, private physicians have to prove why, in their side, this worker is guaranteed enough to be trusted in their case. Where let's take an example from the status quo, where at the end of the day, the parents are being neglected by the elder home, especially when they need special treatment. It will be more dangerous because the elder home have to take care a lot of their parents that couldn't be neglected, other people to only focusing in one person only, right? Where the Asian parents, especially the elder one, are refused to tell that if they're not okay to this worker because they have to taking care of lost parents. We know the fact that many Asian parents, they have, they have emotional powers in their heart, where they refuse to tell their children, they refuse to tell other people, because that that if time is over, if they're not okay, because they feel like, oh my god, if I tell my child, if I tell these workers, Emma will be burden them or not, right? But then let's move to my second and last argument then. Sorry. First, at the moment when the stigmatization becoming narrative in Asian countries, it will push some of low-income families to follow the trends, to do the same at the end of the day, right? The low-income family will be on pressure to follow the trends. However, they will be labeling as someone who doesn't care with their families by the society because they couldn't afford elder home, they couldn't hire a worker to taking care of the family. They will push to buy luxury thing and stuff as what the society can competitively compete to each other, that they can provide a good facility to their parents. And B, it will be unhealthy circumstances where the rich family compared to the low income family, they will they will competitively show to one to each other that our families is the best of taking care of parents. Meanwhile, you don't have that kind of money to take care of your parents, right? Which we think it's so abusive. So for us, this reason, Sum shall win this debate. Okay, before I start my speech, maybe my voice is a little bit too loud, so please don't get offended anyway. And yeah, engagement, please. Okay, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Before I start with my speech, there's something that I need to clarify on this debate anyway. So first, where's debate going, right? So this debate is actually going to whether or this actual debate is intended to whether or not that the stigmatization is justifiable at the end of the day. But see how the opposition just tried to justify that outsourcing elder care is bad, etc., etc. That means that they doesn't go where's this debate going anyway. Second, they cannot justify that the stigmatization cannot push cannot create a push to the child or the parent itself so that they won't get any burden at the end of the day, but at the same time that they try to justify that if there's no such stigmatization, there will be a push. So I think there will be contradictive here anyway. So then I need to clarify here is one, the characterization of relationship, right? So both sides of the house, I can agree that both sides of the house cannot bring this. But anyway, I can bring this because why? We can understand that parents and children still communicate anyway, right? Parents and children can still communicate and discuss, right? They doesn't discuss this because why? Because there's agreement at the end of the day with parents and children. Because why? Because again, this is exceptional. This is, yes?
We already discussed in the speech that people still have discussion, just not to a level where it's fulfilling the parents' emotional needs. Do not ignore that.
Yes, I know that they not sorry. I know that you're trying to say that there will be no emotional connection whatsoever in the discussion, but let me see here that you cannot just generalize every parents that eventually will to fulfill the interest of the children anyway because they are, oh my god, these are my children, etc., etc. But it's also that children that will care of their parents and will involving their needs eventually, right? So I think there's not justifiable that you say that the parents will just what do you say that just putting their child interest to evolve something like that first, but they also can just forward their interest first at the end of the day, and there's still an agreement that they will they want or not to go to outsourcing at the end of the day, and that is why that there's still care, that there's still agreement, and if both sides agree, then why there no care at the end of the day, right? Second, they doesn't really complete explaining that what is the form of outsourcing really is, right? They're just saying that we put our parents in the asylum or whatever, and they are saying that we abandon our parents. No, thank you. But notice that that is not only the form of outsourcing at the end of the day, right? Both cases cannot bring this, but there's a form of we can live they can live with our another family, for example. Is that a form of care? Yes. they can meet their family, they can still have care, and we can also visit them anyway because they're living with their family, or even in form of outsourcing. If all of the family lives in a one house, that is a form of outsourcing, ladies and gentlemen, and there's still care anyway, and that is why outsourcing is actually justifiable because it's not left your parents in asylum or whatever that is, but it's actually just want to guarantee that they have care as they trying to justify they have a good health as something like that. So third, as an extension of my DBM speech, this is what they cannot justify anyway, that there will be pressure from this stigmatization anyway. So as an attention, that pressure is because of the stigmatization creates a pressure. It is a social narrative. There's something that they want to do society with the child that holds to burdens anyway, burdens to live their family and burdens to live their parents anyway. Thus then makes contradictive that you say that there will be no burden or push whatever, because it's progressive. They need to do something. They want to live their family. They have a low income jobs, but they can get pressured to because they have a burden to just fully 100% uptime care to their parents. Thus, they make a burden, yes, and that will cause another impacts like their mental health issues because they have pressure anyway, and so on and so forth. Two, my responses to the case of the opposition team. So they have say that there's no guarantee of care. Of course, like the worst case, if our parents got abused anyway. But at the end of the day, we still know that they get abused, right? We still know that they are getting abused because why? Because we still visit them anyway. Because they can contact us. Even if they are conservative, they can still have WhatsApp. They can still telephone because that we can know what their conditions are. And then this why that is not justifiable that they will be get abuses. Yes.
What about the parents that have health issues that they cannot contact their families to tell them that they got abused?
I think it's clear that we still visit them. We still protect it. We still have an eye on them. We still care about them. It's not like left your parents, you throw your parents. It's a different case. In here that we are doing it for good, right? So there's still a care at the end of the day. So second, you say that this will create this will create a trend that you should abandon your parents anyway. I think this is a false perspective because why? Because one, you can at your side of the house you cannot justify that the stigmatization of this will bring a good or bad impact anyway, right? And second, you create a claim that this will be a trend anyway, and I can flip the case because why? There will be no trend anyway. Because why? Because people can follow their own condition anyway, and then this why panels don't buy their case anymore. So moving to the clashings anyway, the clashings very simple, right? Does the care of the parents is fulfilled anyway? Does the interest of the parent fulfill anyway? On both sides, yes. But what is the benefit? But what is the exclusivity anyway on our side of the house? We still fulfill the care, but we also not giving more burdens to the child involved, right? Because why? Because the child can more freely organize their economics, for example. They can focus to care more their child, for example. And that's why panels we want the clashings anyway. So what is the indicators anyway of this motion anyway? So I think the indicators is why is it actually not justifiable to have such stigmatization in the society anyway, right? So I think it is not simply just not justifiable because it has an intention. What is the intention to do so? They want a care. They want to still care for their parents, the children that has a burden to do so, but they cannot simply because they have a lot of burdens, low income jobs that they trying to justify at the end of the day. And then it's why panels that eventually that this is not justifiable, right? So what is the exclusivities on this debate in our side house? We have the exclusivities because we care about the children's parents. We care about every actors. We care about the children's family that needs to be protected. We care about the child that is actually has a lot of burdens, and that's how the house that's saying that in low income jobs or whatever. And that is why panels we have the exclusivities. We win in the clashings, and I can prove you that their case is not justifiable at the end of the day. And that is why panels we so proud to propose this motion.
I shouldn't cover the mic, should I? Am I audible at this volume? All right, that's great. Pronouns he, him. Yeah, as usual. Right. I shall start my debate in three. Wait. In 3, 2, 1. All right, adjudicators. Now, let us clearly map out the arguments that have been provided by proposition, and we will state what are their faults, what are their problems, and why they have entirely failed to provide for their arguments. Right? First of all, starting from the proposition 1, they have stated that Asian countries, people in Asian countries work and have no time, and so on and so forth, which has been debunked by both my LO and also my second proposition. Right? We have already stated that these people, these economic conditions, right, that prop has not proven that elder care will be beneficial, right? When they say that people, that these economic, that these countries are economically burdened and they do not have the care to provide for these countries, how will then they provide for elder care? That has already been stated to be more financially burdening for these families. They are expensive, and proposition has even agreed to the fact that with cheaper take that later. With cheaper elder care, it has less quality and there is no guarantee. I would say that they explicitly stated by themselves that these cheaper elder care have no guarantee to have quality. Whereas on their case, if they were to provide for their own, then they will guarantee that these people will be safe from any form of abuse. Now, before I move on, I will take your POI. Thank you.
Please try engage to our another alternative is not engaging on our case of educating.
Right, we have already engaged. Now let's move on to their other quote-unquote engages. Right, they stated that there are other forms of elder care. Now here's one problem to this fact. Right, they stated this on the third proposition. The third proposition cannot bring any other. The other speakers did not bring any of this in PM or OPM. Therefore, we can only engage with their other metrics that I have already provided, which is elder care. Now, even if, let's entertain them, even if we engage into these other sorts of cares, right? Things like people coming to their houses and so on and so forth, that even if we hire a nurse, for example, because that's our example, right? It's still not enough to prove why the emotional needs will be met, because our first opposition has already stated what is elder care, right? Our first opposition has already stated that elder care is, our first opposition has already stated that care is two things. One, the quality of health of these elders, but two, in Asian society specifically, because we are catering to Asian societies according to the motion itself, is family engagement, because this is the big thing that they have consistently dismissed in our case. We are talking about Asian families. We are talking about Asian communities, people who put an emphasis on family comparatively in America and so on and so forth, which do not put as much of an emphasis on that, which is why their case has completely dismissed one of our points, and they have lost this debate, right? Additionally, they stated that elder care is still care, which we have already debunked on the fact that, on the clarification which what is care, and they've already agreed to that. Secondly, they stated that children will not abandon their parents. They will still visit. Now, there is a clear difference between visit and taking care. One, it is a limited time, and two, there is no observation for the parents. For example, they said that cheap elder care do not guarantee quality, right? And then, if they state that they will visit them occasionally, how will they know of these sorts of guarantees? How will they know of the quality of the parents? How will they know how the parents are doing, and so on and so forth? Which is entirely why they have ruined their own arguments, right? And another statement that they provided is that parents' needs are vast, right? They want different things, and so on and so forth. That is exactly why the motion has narrowed this down. We have narrowed this motion down to specifically Asian countries. Why is that? Because Asian society as a whole puts an emphasis on family, on blood relation. This is why we are focusing on Asian countries and not European countries or American countries or other sorts and so forth. That is because of the fact that these Asian countries put a focus and an emphasis on the importance of family.
Asian countries, especially things like Indonesia and other countries, they care far more for their family, because that is why we are emphasizing on Asian countries, right? Now, moving on to the clashes, our main clash for this debate is which side actually solves the root of the issue, which side actually caters to these families and provides benefits not only for the parents, but also for the children, because we have identified that those are the two main vulnerable actors, right? So, yeah, my first opposition has already stated multiple reasons as to why elder care isn't implementable for Asian countries. And allow me to reiterate that. First of all, elder care is expensive, which proposition has agreed to the fact that there is no guarantee for quality and so on and so forth, right? So they agree that elder care is expensive. But not only that, what proposition did not even engage into is our principal case. Our principal case, the children must care for their parents as they have for them. Their parents have provided them with life. They've raised them ever since they were a baby, ever since they were in the womb. They've provided for such care for them. And yet, proposition completely dismisses this fact. They dismiss the fact that it is a moral obligation for these children to take care of their parents like how their parents have for them. And with that, they've entirely lost this debate, right? Secondly, even if we partake in their practical case, right? In Asian communities, elders want to be close with their children. Elders want to be with their children. That is exactly why we have clarified that care means not only healthiness, but also enjoyment, fulfillment, because they are trying to enjoy the last moments of their life. And for Asian countries specifically, how would the parents want to enjoy the last moments of their life? They want to enjoy them with their children, the very beings that they've raised ever since they were born, up until this point. And that is exactly why we have solved the root of the issue. Why? Because we fulfill the need for care, which is two things: health and also happiness. But not only that, our side allows for the children to fulfill their moral obligation as children themselves, to fulfill the need that these children actually have to fulfill and provide for their parents as their parents have for them. Right? Now, moving on and concluding to this, actually, we have already stated multiple reasons as to why our side as the opposition has entirely won this debate. Okay? To re-clarify and to recap, one, both sides have already agreed that elder care is expensive and it will only burden the parents themselves and also the children. Why? It is expensive, so the children will have to work more. And secondly, they said to themselves that there is no guarantee of the quality if it's cheaper, right? Secondly, we have already our side has already proven that we have met all the necessities and the burdens of proof to prove why we need to stigmatize elder care, right? 3 points to this, right? First of all, this negates increase in people neglecting their parents because, well, as my LO and my second opposition have already stated, that by not stigmatizing this, people will have more incentive to not care for their parents and therefore, as we previously iterated, neglect their moral obligation as children, right? And secondly, we've already stated that by them being there for their parents is all they need and all they want for care to happen. Because for care to happen, one, they would need to be healthy, and two, they would need to be happy, right? And by the children themselves providing for their parents, they will be healthy and happy because the children and with them, and with that is why opposition is very proud to oppose.
Right, panel. One key thing here we want you to notice is one, we've already given you reasons why elder care doesn't work in Asian communities as well. But even if Prop says that this is not really the motion of the debate, we've already given you principal reasons why stigmatization needs to happen in Asian communities, right? One, because once as stated as in the LO speech because it doesn't align with the community as well, right? I would like to give you another example. In Indonesia, we stigmatize LGBTQ. Why? Because it doesn't align with our principles, right? That is the purpose why we need to that is the purpose why it aligns to stigmatize something that doesn't fit with our core values. Now, I would like to reiterate now what happened during the debate, right? One, there was a significant lack of engagement to our characterization of the status quo. We told you that there's middle income countries, there's middle income people, low income people that cannot afford good healthcare, and they reiterated this by saying different forms of healthcare. There's different forms of elder care, but they did not notice that even though they're different forms, they're still at the end of the day expensive. They even mentioned that they can stay with other families, but I don't think this point needs to be explained in the reply speech, right? Secondly, we've already explained why stigmatization is not complete vilification, right? Stigmatization has exclusions. We are still accounting for people who are physically unable to take care of their child, who physically cannot take care of their parents, who physically cannot take care of their parents, right? We are not vilifying everyone. We've clearly stated that stigmatization only pushes the people who have the physical capability to take care of their parents, who have the mental capability to take care of their parents, but simply refuses to, right? We believe that it is justified to be stigmatized. It's the exact same way how we stigmatize people who don't work even when they are physically capable, correct? Right. Again, third point, we've covered every argument that they brought, right? They tell us that, oh, people need to prioritize their family instead of thing. In the LO speech, we already told you that yes, family is important, but family includes your parents, and so you should not put that priority second just because you already have a new life, because you have a basis of reciprocity, right? I feel like bringing that point later in the speech was already covered by the LO speech. Thirdly, again, they had a lack of engagement to our principles. They did not cover why at the end of the day our basis of reciprocity is unjustified, why the quality of care is unjustified. We feel that at this point of the debate, we've covered all of their arguments. We've covered why at the end of the day the stigmatization exists to qualify the control in Asian communities, and they have not covered most of our points on why at the end of the day it's basically principally justified, and that is why we won today's debate. Thank you very much.
My contribution as a reply speaker in this debate is: first, I will tell you what has happened in this debate. Second, comparison and weighing. And lastly, I'm going to tell about worst case and best case scenario. First of all, what has happened in this debate? I think there's a push and pull between the stigmatization is actually bad or justified in the end of the day. Second of all, there's also a different point of view between which prioritization that the individual or the child should actually prioritize to begin with in the end of the day. Therefore, let's see that answers in the comparison between each side of the house. On the prime minister of the government side of the house, they say that they already stated about the characterization and the interest of the child and the parents within, in which both of them would want attention, but in the end of the day, both of them have different ways to actually go with their lives to begin with, which parents would want more attention, and other parents would also want some interest to actually go out to actually see the world in the end of the day anyway, while the child's interest to be